Hey, welcome back to another Far Beyond the Temple episode where we talk about things that are beyond the norm. We've taken our team down here and we're interchanging them so we can talk about some topics that you probably have heard about, may have even studied a little bit, but that we then can go a little bit deeper on it. So I'm joined this morning to my left for
Bob Benson. I pastor Christ Lutheran Church in Bemis Point. And
I am Mark Hansen. I pastor the Jamestown Church of the Nazarene in Jamestown, New York.
So I have scoured the earth today to find the highly intellectual, and we brought them here on set with Bob and Mark. To answer some questions. We're caught up in a culture that is a tad bit chaotic, I would say, to the two of you. And the Christian community is no different, right? The Christian community right now seems to be a little bit all over the place. We've got some extremes, we've got some centrist stuff going on, and everybody is kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And so one of the topics that I wanted to dig into today a little bit is in general, not specifically, but in general, we're constantly hearing people talk about we're living in the last days. Or are we living in the last days? Is this the end? So I wanted to ask the two of you, when you hear the term living in the last days, what comes to mind for the two of you?
well, I'll tell you, from my perspective, I would say that we're a day closer today than we were yesterday. None of us know the day or the hour, and I want to talk about that a little bit in just a little bit. But as we see these things happen, we go to Matthew 24 and we see, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. They will lead many astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, for the end is not yet. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places and pestilences. And all these things are the beginning of birth pains. So as we read that in Matthew 24, don't we see these things pouring out in front of us? Don't we know that we're coming into the last days? I mean, John wrote of it, and he thought the last days were going to be in his time. And Paul thought the last days were going to be in his time. Here we're 2,000 years later, and I know for sure we're 2,000 years closer to that day. And as we understand the Jewishness of what's going on today, and we understand in the context of what's going on, we look at the feasts, and we have the 3 spring feasts that were completely fulfilled in the first coming of Jesus Christ, and then we have these fall feasts that are coming up very quickly. And in the first century, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, was celebrated over a 2-day period.
Right.
And it was always said of Rosh Hashanah that no man knew the hour or the day. It took 2 witnesses coming to the priest and saying, I've seen the new moon, and then they would blow the trumpet. And I think that's interesting that they would say that about Rosh Hashanah in the first century. And what does Jesus say? He says, no man knows the hour or the day. I think in the Jewish context, they would have known exactly what he was talking about when this was coming. So, we see that things are fulfilling Matthew 24. And if we don't believe that we're in the last days today, I would think that you're misled in some way.
So I want to swing back to that in a second, but Mark, let me get your take on when you hear this. Hey, we're in the last days. What do you think of?
A lot of what Bob said I resonate with is Paul thought he was in the last days. The thing of it is, when what you just read, that stuff has been going on for centuries. There's always been wars. There's always been earthquakes. There's always been nations rising up against nations. So to say, well, this is going on today, and people say, well, and I say, wait a minute, there's always been wars. My understanding of history is there has never been a time in history where there has not been a war going on somewhere. That there has not been an earthquake going on somewhere. Bob and I were talking about this yesterday about the 2-day celebration. So we just need to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Okay, no, I'm joking on that one, okay? But there is something to say, as you were saying that, I thought about it, in that we don't know the times. That is the key.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what your millennial position is. The bottom line is millennial positions are, you got to be ready.
Right.
You got to be ready. That's the bottom line. So if we are, and Bob's right, we are closer. We're 2,000 years closer. We are one day closer. I am in my last days. I probably have more days behind me than I do in front of me, to be honest with you. So I'm in my last days. Are we in our last days? Maybe. There's a lot of stuff going on that we could say, let's take it a step further. We're in an age, especially now, where people are calling good evil and evil good.
Yeah.
To a very high thing, a degree, you know what I mean? And so I see some of this stuff, and there's been plagues before and stuff like that. This isn't even a plague. I'm sorry, it's not a plague. It's not as bad as H1N1. We've treated it like it is worse than that, but it's not. And so that's a whole other issue.
Matter of fact, in the last 20 years, there's been 4 flu seasons more deadly than this thing that we're in right now.
Exactly.
And we didn't close anything down. So there's a motivation behind that. And we have to remember, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and darkness.
Right.
And I believe that that's the warfare. We're in the middle of a spiritual warfare.
And that's been going on.
That's been going on. Yeah.
That right there is a war that has never
But Jesus also says we can know the season.
Mm-hmm.
And as we see the season approaching, he says, you see the leaves start to come out on the tree. You know that summer is coming. And I think we're in that place now. Whether it comes this year, next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And like you said, we don't have a grasp on what God has given us. God has said that we get 70 years, and by reason of strength, 80 years. And if you don't believe that, go to Psalms 90, verse 10, and that's what it tells us there. So, Mark, you're in your 50s. You got 20 years left.
You're older than me.
But we all have to realize that that's the reality of this life.
Exactly.
And we've lost sight of that fact. Yes. Because we all expect to live to be 100 years old.
Or live forever. And,
So,
we were all young at once, and in my mind I'm still 27, and I think I've got, and I don't, and I'm realizing, okay, what is important? And I think that comes down to this, and if we are under judgment, as there's some say we are, and I'm getting that one. If that's the case, you know what? It doesn't mean hunker down either. It does mean we need to be more diligent about spreading the gospel.
Amen. Amen.
So that's going to be my question to the two of you. That again, what you've just laid out is, I think, what is actually not the two of you causing it, but it's the thought process that is really causing a lot of the confusion within the church. Because we keep hearing about the end times. We keep hearing about the last days. We're in the last days. We're in the last days. But as Bob read, we see these signs of the last days. But as you pointed out, Mark, well, we've seen these signs for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And I believe that Paul and John and others really, truly believe
Sure.
that they were in the last days as well. And so we're looking at this, and we have 2,000 years of people believing that we're in the last days. What is it about right now, right, that has the two of you, or that should have people really believing that, hey, the bridegroom is on his way, right? We're no longer, he's closer to coming back than he is to preparing a place for us, right? So what is it that really has the two of you, and should have our listeners keying into, like, okay, hey, stop and grasp this concept, because once we grasp the concept, then that should put us into action. But I think part of the problem is that there's a lot of people looking and going, I've been hearing about this since I was little in church. I've been hearing about this for the last 20 years repeatedly. In the 80s, they were putting signs all over the place that Jesus was coming back in 88. Yeah. Right, so we've been on this kick for a very long time. What is it that has you guys really believing that, hey, this is for real?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. The technology is caught up to the point, Jesus says that when he returns, everybody will see him. And for years and years and years, we didn't understand how that was going to be possible. Well, now you can pick up your telephone and in real time you can watch things going on all over the world. And I think as we see those things, we can see how that's going to be used in the end times. It's just we've never had all of the elements crammed together in a period of time that could be the fulfillment or the beginning of the fulfillment of prophecy. And that's why I believe that we are close. We're in the last days. And like Mark said, the whole admonition is to be ready. If we really believe that we're in the last days, okay, like some of us do, we should be investing in sharing the gospel with everybody. Every opportunity that we have to share the gospel.
One thing, here's another aspect that I don't think we hear much about. We always hear about the negative things. We hear, I was thinking about the book of Revelation.
Right.
It gets all trying to piece that together and everything. It was written to a people who were persecuted, who thought it was their last days, because Paul thought Jesus was coming within his time. Mm-hmm. It was to give them hope. That we win. Don't worry about it. We win. And here's the thing that, and I can get caught up in this as well, is the negative aspect. I'm wondering which one of my brothers or my family members is going to out me.
Right.
Okay, but now I got a vlog out there, so now it doesn't have to be out to say, here, let's go after him. I'm going to say, go after Bob or you or something like that. I think the thing, it also said that there'd be a great falling away, which we saw in the church. As a matter of fact, I think what we're seeing in the people that have come back to church, or maybe they're the true saints, I don't know. But there's also, I think, I can't remember the reference now, but I think it talked about there would be a coming, people would come to Christ. And I'm seeing that there are people, a young man got saved in our church this week, and I've led several people to the Lord, and they're thinking about this. Now, I don't use it as a tool like the old evangelist did. What if you go out there and you get hit by a car? That's right. What if you say that to me again, I hit you in the face? Whatever. I don't know, but it isn't about, they're thinking about it. And they're saying, okay, wait a minute. So God doesn't waste a good crisis. I use that a lot in my sermons and tell my congregation, God doesn't waste a good crisis, and he's not wasting this one. We might be. When the whole COVID thing kicked in, I had a couple older people say, well, I don't care if I get it, I'm ready to go to heaven. I said, yeah, but what about all the other people that maybe are not ready to go to heaven? It's a very selfish attitude. And that's what can happen is we can get, well, I'm ready, that's all that matters.
Well, here's what Paul said about that. He says, for me to remain here is better for you, but I'd rather be there. And is that the attitude that we have? Death is not a punishment, it's the greatest reward. But as long as we're here, for however long that is, we've got work to do. Do we have that attitude? And are we pouring ourselves into that work?
Yeah, and we'd like, well, I got John 3:16 down, I believe. Okay, but what about 1 John 3:16, which says you were supposed to go out and love people into the kingdom?
And I think that you guys are so right in this relationship with Jesus is a personal relationship. It's not a blanket, I believe there's a God out there. Right? It's I have a personal relationship, and I like one of our ministry partners, Summer, was mentioning this last week, how people that we're praying for, that we've been praying for, really intensely, have begun seeing personal things happen in their lives that are making them, forcing them to have to make a choice. And after she said that, I started looking around at the people that I'm praying for, the different ones, and he said, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of people going through individual crises that is really giving them an opportunity for one-on-one. And I don't know that I've seen it at this level ever before. There's this idea that God is saying, like, listen, I care about each one, just like you were saying, Mark. It's not enough just for me to know I'm going to heaven. I should have a heart to want other people to go, but to recognize these situations and then to figure out how to act with these situations. How do we, without banging people over the head, right? How do we invest in them, but how do we come up alongside them and really share, hey, I believe we're in the end days, I see what you're going through, and I really want you to consider Jesus. Right? So as we look at this and as we wrap up this episode of Far Beyond the Temple Curtain, what is it? Give me some specifics that you think that we should really be doing right now. Some we've mentioned, but just kind of lay it out for our listeners and our viewers. What is it that we should really be focused in on if we believe that this is the last days?
Well, I think, it's been a great time to talk to people about what they believe and been able to point people towards Jesus Christ, because people say, oh, the world's so crazy right now. And there is a perfect opportunity. Yes, the world is crazy. But here's the reality. It's going to get crazier, and then we know the end is going to come. Are you prepared for that end? And it gives us an opportunity, especially as people are afraid. I know one of the things that I do, I always preach the gospel at funeral. It's a perfect opportunity. People are already wrestling with their own mortality. And it's a great, hey, do you know where you're going? Is this the end of it or not? And if it's not the end of it, we have a know-so faith in 1 John. It says we can know that we're going to heaven. And we have that guarantee. And it's not a confidence in who we are, but it's a confidence in who God is. And as we share that with people, I've seen that the people are very open to that, especially right now. Do you find that true?
Yeah, I do. I think what Bob said, when we think about what Jesus did, he walked slowly through the crowd. And he listened for a point of connection. And there's a lot of points of connection. When we listen, we know what Paul did. Paul goes into Athens. He's wandering around. Yeah, it reminds me, I wrote a paper on this in college, Evangelism According to the Music Man. And what does he do? If you know the story of the Music Man, the musical, he comes into town, River City, Iowa, and he looks for trouble. He looks for a place where he can say, this is the problem that's got to be solved. So I don't think we've got to look for a problem to be solved. We know what the problem to be solved is. Yeah. But what we do need to do is we need to meet people right where they're at, which is what Jesus did, which is what Paul did. What's really hit me, last week my blog was on fasting, and in doing that, God is opening doors. As I am seeking Him more, He said, okay, now you're focused, now you can really do what I want you to do. So I think it's being available, not being afraid, because we're so, with our culture today, it's like, well, don't talk to anybody about offending them. We got to quit worrying about offending people, because people, imagine what they're going to say when they're in hell, and they're looking up and say, hey, dingbat, why didn't you offend me? Why didn't you tell me? I wanted you to like me. Yeah, I wanted you to like me. I don't care that you like Jesus, just like me. So, and there's a lot of truth there, because I get that with people I know, Christians, they're like, yeah, but I don't want to offend anybody. You know what? Offend them. Mm-hmm. Offend them. But what I found is, I don't think we need to go in there and have a sign, repent or turn or burn. It's meeting where they're at. I have never found, especially with young people, when they find out I'm a pastor, they don't run. They engage me. It's the people my own age that are like, oh, pastor, we know who they are. We're out of here. The younger people they got questions. And if you just put a little energy into them, show them a little care, like probably what Jesus would have done, you're going to find you have some opportunities to talk to some people and meet them where they're at.
We speak the truth in love.
Yeah, and do what Paul did, do what Jesus did. What did he do with the rich young ruler? Well, what must I say? He listened to the question, but he said, "Okay, now I'm gonna engage that point. Let's go with that," as the young people say. Now let's go with that, and let's see where it goes and see what God does with it, and not have our plan, but listen to the Holy Spirit and how is the Holy Spirit leading you. And it may not happen right away, where they receive Christ right there and choose to believe. It may take several, but we've invested. We have to trust that God's got this, and we've done what we're supposed to. Maybe we're supposed to plant a seed. He's going to come over and see Bob. Bob's going to run into this person, and Bob's going to be, well, he gets the notch on his gun, and I don't. Well, I get half a notch. No, it isn't about that. It's about whatever it takes. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. We all invest in people. I think it's interesting that Mark brought up about the rich young ruler. There's only a handful of times that Jesus was asked a direct question and gave a direct answer. And Nicodemus was one of those. And what did he say to Nicodemus? You must be born again. Okay, he knew Nicodemus's need. Okay, and he met him in his need. The rich young ruler, it's a completely different answer.
Yeah.
Sell everything that you have. He knew where the rich young ruler was. Same question. What must I do to be saved? Two completely different answers because they're two completely different people. We want such a pattern. We want to stamp out Christians on the assembly line, and we don't meet people where they are. I think you're right, Mark.
Well, I think that, that's one of the changes right now is our stamping plans have been shut down. And so now it's about, do we know people? Do we know what they really need? How can we meet them? But ultimately, as we close this out, it's about answering the question that Jesus presented to Peter, isn't it? Who do people say I am? And then who do you say that I am? Right? And I think that we have an opportunity right now to be looking at people and say, it's not just about who does your church or your pastor say that I am, but who is it that you say Jesus is? And what are you doing with Jesus? And I think that, Mark, I love what you said because I think it's super relevant right now. There are so many people with questions out there. For years, we've been so afraid to rock the boat and ask the questions and get into the religious conversations with people because we don't want them to be turned off. But right now, there are a lot of people who are tuned in and they really want to answer questions. They really want to talk about things and have discussions, and it opens it up for us. And it opens it up for Far Beyond the Temple Curtain and all of our ministries down here at Traction Ministries to be able to just really talk about things. Super grateful for that. So on behalf of these two gentlemen sitting to my left, probably your right, I want to thank you for tuning into Far Beyond the Temple Curtain. We're going to continue this conversation, probably, most likely, different faces, different voices, as we rotate people in and have conversations about what we hope takes you a little bit far beyond what you normally are talking about. We'll see you next time on Far Beyond the Temple.